this project we will explore some automated image processing for extracting particles. So the general procedure that one would normally follow would be well, you import the movies. These movies have been taken from this Empire dataset, so the 10647, and you align them, and then you estimate the CTF, and you would look at the CTF to check that everything looks fine. So here we see a bit this behavior. This is very typical that at the beginning it moves much more than at the end. We see the typical CTF estimates. Okay, so you would estimate the CTF, and now you pick, and you pick. Typically use the default parameters. I'm sure that if you play with the parameters you can do a much better job, but with the default parameters you would have here we have like 400, almost 500 micrographs, and we have found almost 400,000 particles. And when you look at the movies, when you look at the micrographs, what you see in the micrographs is that particles are very packed. So they are very close to each other. So it is a very concentrated sample, and then when you run with the default parameters in Crayola, let us see, I think should be coming. I think it takes some time because it is a big file. Yeah, here it is. So what we see is that it finds particles everywhere. So it finds, because it is so much packed, that it finds particle everywhere. So even this one, for instance, here it is interesting to see that Crayola is not picking this kind of artifacts. But yeah, so we have almost 500,000 particles. So I want to close, yeah. Okay, so Crayola finds 400,000, Reliance 40,000, GeoAutoMatch only 10,000. So when you click on one of them, you see that GeoAutoMatch is missing many of the particles, and Reliance is not doing also a great job either. So none of them is doing very well because this is a difficult data set. And if you extract the particles with any one of those, then what you see, for instance, this one you extract, and then you look at the classes that you have selected with Reliance. That seems to be a little bit of a compromise between picking too much and picking too few. You see that most of the classes here, well, there are a couple of good classes, but all the others, they look like bad stuff. So for some reason these particles doesn't seem to pick very well. Okay, so now this would be the standard procedure. You can check the other possibilities. So what are the classes selected by GeoAutoMatch, the classes selected by Cryospark, not Cryospark, the Crayola. So we can check, for instance, this one, and what we will see now is another way of analyzing the data in a fully automatic way. So I'm waiting for these classes to appear. They will eventually appear. So here is first thing is that you align your movies, but then what you will see is that some of them, they are moving too much. How much is too much? So they are moving like more than 5 angstroms from one frame to the next. Here are the classes of Crayola. So yeah, much better than before. So we have a few more views. So we have this one, this one, this one, but otherwise also quite a lot of bad stuff. So this is not a good particle, these are not good particles, and we have many particles like those. And we have seen the reason why, because the micrographs, the particles are very much concentrated. Okay, so the thing is that many of these movies, they are moving quite a lot. So almost a third of them. So almost a third, they are moving too much. Also, this is a CryoSense, is a program to discard bad looking images. So this was developed by Michael Cianfrocco, and we don't export here, we don't expose to the outside the micrographs that have been rejected. You see that they go down from 309 to 233, but if you are interested, you can go to the extra MICA-SES, and then you can see the different reasons why they have been excluded. So we can check, for instance, this one. I don't know why. Okay, so we cannot open here. Let me check. Okay, so we have moved the project from one machine to another, but you see here it is a little bit too small, but you can see that they have been rejected because of empty or no eyes, crystalline eyes, empty eyes with no particles, so different reasons. And it is again about a little bit like 20% of the particles of the movies that survived this filter because they were moving too much, they have failed because of different eyes problems. And then some of them we can analyze the tilt, so whether there is so the electron beam should be perpendicular to the sample, but sometimes it is not, or not fully perpendicular. So we can see, no, probably not, analyze results. We can see why these have been rejected. So they are here. So we can see that some of them, I did it wrong. Okay, so let me open it again. So here we are. So what we do is we take the micrograph, we split it in 4 different regions, and then we analyze the PSD power spectrum of those different regions, and we check whether they correlate well or not. And sometimes it is very easily seen that they don't correlate very well. So for instance, here you see that these tone rings are different from these ones, are different from these ones. There is a bit of astigmatism also here. There is some kind of funny pattern, and for whatever reason they don't correlate, and they should. So 6 micrographs have been excluded out of this many, out of 227, so very few, so about 3%. But you see that from a data set with almost 500 micrographs, many of them had problems, and we are left with about a half of them. Then and all these decisions have been taken automatically. You have to set up the thresholds, but the default thresholds are more or less reasonable. And then we will go to do the picking. So the picking, we have seen that pickers have problems here. So for instance, here we estimate for a few micrographs, we see 13 micrographs out of these 227. We take 13 of them and we do Cryolo. So Cryolo with the default parameters, again, it has the same problem as we had before. So it is not that we have solved anything, it has exactly the same problems. But now we will enter into a pipeline that will try to analyze what is which are really the particles there. Okay, so first thing here is that Crayola estimates the box size, so can estimate the box size, that is it has estimated 216 in this case, and then from this 216 we can expand this value. This is the box size estimated by Crayola, and then we can expand and generate different versions of that 216. So sometimes we want a bigger box, sometimes we want the particle diameter, the particle radius, and different programs. You see here we have parameters for G-Automatch, parameters for Reliant picking, parameters for Topaz, and then we output different sizes that are needed by the different programs. So for instance, if you want to use the log filter in Reliant, these are the best parameters based on our previous experience. So now if you go to the log picker of Reliant, this one is using these values here that have been automatically determined by this box that is coming from Crayola. So this is Scipion, this is Crayola. So you see, it is very convenient. It adapts to the data. Also, on the other side, we will estimate the CTF, but not with a single program, but with a couple of programs. And this CTF, we see that from these 227 micrographs, 12 of them have been rejected mostly because their resolution doesn't reach this threshold of 3 angstroms. And something nice, for instance, we can open any one of these estimates, and here you have a table with a typical output of CTF-Find4. You can see also the trajectory, you can see the defocus, you can make all kind of analysis on the data. So you can, for instance, analyze, okay, what is the histogram of defocus. So you see it typically goes from a little bit less than a micron to a little bit more than 2 microns, which is the typical range. And also, for instance, you can analyze what is the resolution reported by CTF-Find4. And then there has been one mistake. So this is 700. So when CTF-Find4 cannot find the feeding, so it didn't do a good job here. So it assigns a resolution that is very bad. We also see some micrographs with ice problems, and they have escaped, for instance, this filter of Mikasa. All algorithms, they have false positives, false negatives, to remind that. So it has escaped that filter, but there are not so many with ice problems. But it has escaped Mikasa, but it will not escape the resolution filter, because the resolution found by CTF-Find4 is only 9 angstroms. The reason is that you see the tone rings do not match the ones that are in the micrograph, and it will not go through this filter of 3 angstroms resolution. So here that particular micrograph will fail the filter, and then will go to the discarded micrographs. Discarded micrographs are not deleted, but they are put aside, and if you want to analyze them separately, then you can. But if you look at the CTF, then you can decide what to do with these guys that for some reason they have a resolution that is worse than 3 angstroms. And then we will estimate the CTF with XMIP. XMIP also has another ice detector, and it has also an astigmatism criterion. So there is one because of ice. So there is a little bit of ice still, and then it has been rejected. And then we go into the picking. So the picking, the parameters have been automatically determined by Criollo. We have adapted to the different programs, and then each one of the programs with these parameters is producing a different set of particles. So this one now is producing 74,000, this one 44, 20, and yeah, this is the CDF54. So we have three pickers. We go into the deep consensus. So the deep consensus will take the particles. If we look at the numbers almost 150,000 coordinates have entered into the protocol, but only 35,000 go out. The reason is that many of these are redundant, so the same particle has been found by the three pickers. And another reason is that this deep consensus calculates a score of how good that particle is, and this score goes from 0 to 1, and if it is 1, it is supposed to be a particle that is has been seen by the three pickers, and if it is 0, it is a particle that it is a very good candidate for not being a particle. And then we have here, we can generate an automatic filter. You can put this to -1 or to 0, and then none of them are rejected. And this is the redundancy that I was talking before. So if two coordinates are pointing to the same location within a 30% of accuracy, so with a difference in size that is less than 30% of the box size, then they are considered to be pointing to the same particle. So this is a threshold for this score I was talking. So first we group the redundant coordinates, and then we analyze the score, and 35,000 coordinates go out. Okay, so we can look at these 35,000 coordinates to check how good they are. And okay, so it is a relatively decent picking. So we can check another micrograph, and well, we don't see complete disasters. Probably we are missing some particles, but then this is not our final picking. So we will use this data to train the neural network algorithms and GAutomatch to pick particles like those. And a reminder, all this is fully automatic. We don't have to do anything. We can take just the whole pipeline and repeat it, and we'll do that later at the end. Okay, so we extract the particles, and then we classify. So we see that these 35,000 particles, they classify into these classes. So much better picking than compared to what we had before. So before we had some good classes, not so many, and many bad stuff. Here now we have many more good classes. Still we have some bad stuff. So remind, this bad stuff has been found by some pickers. It has gone through the deep consensus. So this is just a reminder, all algorithms, they have good false positives, false negatives, and there are particles that are particularly good at going through all these filters. Even this one has escaped all these controls. So, but still, all this up to here is fully automatic. Okay, now CryoAssess can separate the good classes from the bad classes. So we have here the good classes according to CryoAssess. So we see that most of them are good classes. Some of them are not so good, particularly this one is not a good class, these ones are not good, and they're a little bit fuzzy. It is true that there is something in the middle, but they are not good classes. And we can check the bad classes, for instance. Yeah, so here these are certainly not good classes, none of them. Then a little bit of more stuff. So we center the particles, we take the classes, the 10 classes with largest number of particles from the good classes here. So we take the good classes, we center the particles, we take the particles from the 10 biggest classes, we reclassify them. So now we reclassify, so half of them go to these populated classes, and again, as always, most of the particles are good. So these particles here, they have escaped picking, the deep consensus, the MIC-assess, so the 2D classification. So these particles were put into good classes before, and then they have also escaped the MIC-assess. So you can imagine that you can have false positive if you are not very careful about your processing. You can make big mistakes. Okay, so again, some cryo-assess. Again, we extract the good classes. So here we have supposedly good particles that we want G-AutoMatch to look for, and now we see that that is true. So those are really good averages. And now we ask G-AutoMatch to find these particles, and it finds 39,000 particles. So we can compare to the one before. Before it found only 20,000. Now, after all this sophisticated processing, it has doubled the number of particles, and we can check on the data set, so just to see whether we see any suspicious pattern, but we don't see any. So yeah, so we have doubled the number of particles. Yeah, here there are some mistakes. So we have doubled the number of particles on half of the micrographs. So half of the micrographs had problems with eyes and different beam tilt problems. And by using a more sophisticated image processing, we are able to double the number of particles on half of the micrographs. So if everything was perfect, you can imagine that you can have 4 times more particles. 4 times because you are not halving the number of micrographs, and because you are doubling the number of particles. And now we go into micrograph cleaner removes coordinates that are on carbon etches and ice crystals, aggregations, and bad stuff. And then we retrain Cryolo. So we train Cryolo with this set of particles, and we pick again using Cryolo. And now it produces fewer particles, but they should be much better. So they should be much better than we had before. So now we don't see this picking absolutely everything. So now Cryolo is doing a much better job than it did before. And then again we go through deep consensus, where we are putting the newly found particles. We have the new G-AutoMatch, the new Cryolo, and the old particles coming from the deep consensus, because those were supposed to be particles found by other pickers in a previous stage. And micrograph cleaner, we extract the particles, we reclassify, take the good classes, and this is just so the good classes we have 34,000 particles. We can check on these coordinates. So we check those coordinates, and they should be relatively good. So we see, for instance, this particle here that was selected before in one of the previous pickers. Through all this sophisticated picking, has been dropped, and here we have most of the particles are good. Here there is some mistake, and here, for instance, we see that we have done a very good job. And if we classify the particles into classes, we see that all of them, or most of them, are pretty good. So we have still a few problematic particles, and some of them that cannot be aligned so well. We see the particle inside, but they cannot be aligned. But most of them, you can see that the sizes are small, 90, 100, but here we have 2400. So most of the particles are good, and it is fully automatic. So here you also have a kind of fully automatic process. You have to decide what is the box size, but here the box size is automatically determined. But aside from the box size and the different parameters for the pickers, all this path is also automatic. But we have seen that there is a huge variation in the number of particles. There are very big mistakes. Most of the classes that we were seeing here, they were not good. While in a more sophisticated pipeline, you have much better particles, and without having any human intervention. And here I will show you how to, so let's say that you're happy with this workflow. So with this workflow, you can select from here, or select to here. So we select all the boxes on top. Now you can export. So you export it as a JSON file, so this workflow JSON, and then in a new project you can import this workflow. You simply have to change the path of the micrograph or the movies, and then you launch it, and everything is launched at once. So all these protocols, they work in a streaming. So in a streaming means that if you have the full data set acquired, then that's fine, it will be processed. But if you are acquiring at this moment, then the new movies are processed as soon as they appear in the folder. So and everything is going down in this analysis. Once you finish your acquisition, at the end, after a little bit of delay, you will have your particles here. So this is a very convenient way of processing. So this would be all for this project. See you in the next one.